Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to this panel session on the business case for successful digital transformation, where we will discuss some real-world examples of how mobile operators can monetize enterprise 5G services. And we will lean on Huawei for some of this information, taking its experiences in China, where private 5G is being rolled out mostly with operators, and also from its experiences elsewhere. With lessons hopefully in how to scale enterprise 5G for the whole telecom sector. My name is James Blackman. I'm an editor with RCR Wireless, and I'm chairing this session. And I'm joined on the panel by Andy Purdy, who is Chief Security Officer at Huawei Technologies. And beside Andy, it's my pleasure also to introduce Robert Johnson, who is President for the Institute for New Economic Thinking. And finally, John Arnold, who is Principal at J. Arnold and Associates. Robert and John will give a broader context and a view of how this is going in different regional markets and what it all means. So welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining. We have a little less than 40 minutes on the clock, and we will save some time at the end for questions. So please ask them at any time in the event platform, and we will get to them as we can, likely at the end of the session. But just to begin, I think it would be good if each of the panelists can introduce themselves and say something about their companies and their roles and their views on 5G transformation in the enterprise space. Andy, perhaps if we can start with you.
Well, it's great to be with you. Huawei has been working hard to help advance technology and bring information communication technologies to the world. We've been going through a difficult time, and we see light at the end of the tunnel. And the transitions along the technology innovation path are very, very exciting. The importance of connecting more people, of connecting people more effectively, of help make it possible for carriers to connect people is all part of the challenge as we try to move toward an intelligent sensing world that will benefit all mankind.
Lovely. Thank you, Andy. And Robert, can you say a few words?
Sure. Robert Johnson has been both in the Republican Senate with the Budget Committee and Chief Economist in the Senate Banking Committee years past. Spent a lot of time in international finance and particularly focused on Asian emerging markets, and then co-founded with several others the Institute for New Economic Thinking in response to the great financial crisis. I spent a great deal of time looking at the relationship between the United States and China across many different policy dimensions, and am very concerned, obviously, about the ability to be realized, the constructed potential that lies underneath, and I see lots of constructed potential in this 5G realm, and look forward to discussing particular issues today. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And finally, John.
Yeah, thanks, James, and glad to be with this group today. And hello and welcome to everyone here. I know this is a global forum, and really happy to be part of it. I am based in Toronto, Canada, although I'm currently actually in London, England. And I am an independent technology analyst, and we're kind of a rare breed. But we have a lot of latitude in the technologies we look at. And I've been mostly in the communications technology space for about 20 plus years now. So I stay very close to voice, video, data, how all these streams come together. And as Andy was saying, realizing the potential, 5G is just another big chapter in that bigger digital transformation story. And I think we're going to tie a lot of those ideas together today. And so you can look at the technology at face value, but I think you also have to look at some of the global realities, because everything about 5G, I think we'll all agree, is it's very global technology, how it's going to unfold. And so this isn't just a matter of whoever's got great technology is going to be successful. It's a much bigger story, and that's why we're here.
Lovely. Thank you, John. Thank you all. Okay, so just to start with, maybe we can start with Huawei. We can start with Andy. You mentioned their difficult times. I mean, just can you talk, Andy, about the current trade restrictions and such like, and how Huawei is managed in the circumstances, and has the enterprise 5G story gone some way to replace your regional M&O business?
Well, we have been adjusting to the trade restrictions on the ability of American companies to sell to us by heavily investing in R&D and ramping up our efforts to try to have a stronger focus on bringing automated, intelligent technology to industries such as shipping, waterways and ports, oil and gas, healthcare, digital finance, rail, and aviation. We've strengthened the diversification of our products, sometimes changing the product life cycle, changing components at times. We've also concentrated on the diversification of our supply chain, prioritization of the useful life of certain products, adjusting components, trying to promote a greater resilience capability going forward.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, and John, you mentioned this is a kind of a global realities and a global market for this stuff. Just talk around the state of the telecoms market more generally, and how important is this enterprise 5G opportunity, which we're here to talk about? How important is this for traditional kind of regionally focused telecoms providers? It's a messy market, right? And there's MNOs are competing with big global vendors and hyperscalers and SIs and this kind of stuff. Are they making a good fist of it, in your opinion?
Well, I think that's a good way to look at it, James, because this is not a market that you basically continue serving as a dominant player just because you're the incumbent. And I think the big things at play here, first, is that the telcos have had a very good run migrating from 3G to 4G, where most of the business, the money, etc., came from voice services and was primarily consumer centric, right? But 5G is much more transformational and a much bigger opportunity for enterprise. And, yes, we can talk about Industry 4.0. I think that's the name of the game for a lot of this, but it is broader than that. And 5G, to be successful, this is a very different kind of proposition, whereas you say, James, the telcos just don't get the business because they're the incumbents. They may get the business for the connectivity, but like everything else in this digital transformation universe now, the value has shifted, right? From hardware to software, and now basically to who is the most effective cloud operator. And these are not the strong suits of telcos. They're not generally known for innovation and developing their own platforms and solutions. And when we start talking about these enterprise deployments, we have to start thinking about, okay, private networks are a big part of the story here, because that's the only way these kind of closed environments within an industrial setting can control, right, all of the security, the bandwidth, all the pieces you need to have reliability and uptime, and all that connectivity that allows these applications to take shape. But the real value, you talk about the hyperscalers, James, that's what these guys are really good at, is monetizing cloud platforms that perform very complex tasks. And when you put yourself in the shoes of the buyer, and I know others will say the same things, I'm sure, the telcos are probably not top of the list of who comes to mind for an IT or even a CIO making decisions about 5G investments for business or enterprise use. They're probably going to be more comfortable with the vendors. Yes, maybe the hyperscalers, and certainly the MVNOs and the MNOs who are in the business of developing solutions. And that's a bigger story, more complex than just connectivity. So the telcos have to really, I think, either reinvent themselves along that path or be more open to partnerships with vendors. And, Huawei is a great example of that. Of course, different routes to market. And that's what I think, as you say, James, makes this a messy space, right? And you have to be very careful and not just take the business for granted.
Yeah, lovely. Okay, that's very interesting. And perhaps we'll get into some of that. But I'm also interested, Robert, in the kind of regional picture. And I think you mentioned constructive potential. I wonder if there's some destructive potential as well. I mean, a sense of resistance and enthusiasm, if you like, for 5G related to its potential in different regional markets. Is that right? Can you talk about kind of regional tensions? Is there a difference between 5G powered transformation in China versus in Europe and the US, for example? Where are the tensions and what is at stake?
Well, I guess I would separate out just generically places where there are producers, the US and China, and places that are largely consumers in the global north, and I'll put Europe in that box. It's not entirely true, but just as a meta frame, I think it's helpful. Originally, many years ago, when I visited China, I experienced concern about what I'll call security and privacy. And they were concerned whether it was Apple or Google or Amazon or whoever, what would come in and would people have their privacy. And they were frightened of the potential. And I think whenever anything is new, people are trying to suss out what's happening. More recently, with Huawei's excellence and the cutting edge innovations that have emanated from China, it's as if it's been reversed. In the United States now, there's a lot of expression of concerns about privacy, national security, integrity. But underneath both of these things, and this comes from being a Senate senior staffer, there's often a confusion between what is about national, what we might call the common good, and what's actually protection of a provider that's under threat. And right now in the United States, I think the 5G has gone beyond much of what the Americans are producing. And they're, if you will, raising the flag of security to try and buy time. And I think this is a mistake. I won't go on much longer. But I think when you rise to the challenge of competition, you join the innovative dynamic and you can move forward. When you play these games of resistance, you run the risk of falling further behind. I think the Europeans are focused on that common good, but receptive to things from all other places. I think the United States and China right now have reversed roles with regard to 5G, and the US is now the protectionist, and China is the, I say, cutting edge innovator that America should get back in the saddle and try not try to surpass, but try to learn from and emulate so that they are at the cutting edge going forward as they had been for many years.
Okay, so some big ideas and some big themes in there. I don't think we're going to get into all of it, but just related to that, I mean, and Robert, to stick with you, I think you know, there's Africa as well. You know, what's the sense there of the opportunity for 5G to change the industrial sector? You know, it's not something I cover a great deal. You know, your insights would be helpful to me.
Yeah, well, I run a thing called the Commission on Global Economic Transformation at INET, and one of the 5 key pillars has to do with the enormous demographic bulge in Africa and the young population. Number 2, climate in an equatorial region can destroy subsistence farming. So the need for a development strategy, and it's not going to be the East Asian, what you might call learning by doing, infant industry protection, labor intensive, export-led growth. In an era of automation, machine learning, Africa is looking for a transformational, profound platform to bring things on stream, both in the realm of education for these young people and in terms of professional capacities, larger scale markets, et cetera, for people like designers. And so every time I go to Africa, and as a matter of fact, when I run around New York and talk to friends who are from the African continent, but now working in finance, the venture capital industry is very excited about the deployment of high-level tech like 5G throughout the continent. It's the most, I won't say it's the most optimistic, it's the most curious and enthusiastic region that I have encountered.
So that's very interesting. So very interesting kind of a global perspective there. Just to bring it back to the, I guess, the practicalities of this and how this is going into market. Andy, maybe you can, you know, and the point of the discussion here, maybe, Andy, you can give some examples of what you might call proven enterprise 5G cases, you know, in China, as kind of Robert suggested it, and in markets where Huawei is working, which, you know, are seeing a strong return on investment for the network operators already.
Sure. So as a prelude to that, let me say that It's very important for the carriers, in most cases, to upgrade their ICT infrastructure so that they have the capacity to take advantage and they can connect more effectively at higher quality to their customers and their potential customers. And then they can have the opportunity to prioritize what they're going to invest in to help bring about greater results. So our emphasis has been, and we see this at the Mobile World Congress in Barcelona recently, the idea of 5G to business applications that integrate artificial intelligence, cloud, and video capabilities. And so this work, enhanced by R&D, is why we were able to grow our enterprise business 30% in 2022 over the previous year. So helping carriers to connect with different kinds of technologies so they can have a consistent platform and not have lagging points in the platform. So millimeter wave, fixed wireless access, cable to the office, cable to the home, Wi-Fi 6, and soon Wi-Fi 7 are all capabilities that the carriers need to feel that they have the capability to get to the place where they can take advantage of some of these opportunities. So let me give some of the specifics. Reduction of energy consumption is very important. The millisecond level intelligent power optimization and millisecond level real-time resource shutdown helps reduce energy consumption. And we see examples of this in Switzerland, China, and Spain. In Italy, a carrier leveraged 5G fixed wireless access to upgrade their carrier networks for a better use experience. In Finland, a carrier launched the 5G fixed wireless access guaranteed 100 megabit per second package in its contract with consumers. And their average revenue per user is up over 60% because of the benefits of this. In Italy, millimeter wave has brought GPS level experience, improving coverage and quality. In Germany, they've used network slicing. So they take they create out of a public 5G network, a network slice from the public network that provides guaranteed railway network service performance. In Kuwait, a carrier helps address the oil and gas connectivity challenges in remote deserts, which can pose high risk to production safety and oil theft. So they combine 5G, CCTV, and artificial intelligence to enable quick service provisioning. In Germany, a carrier used 5G lease lines for connectivity and partnered with live video streaming service providers for customized services for sports club, including leased line access, AI cameras, live video streaming, training storage. In Thailand, the carrier integrated the application devices and service capabilities of ecosystem partners, so hospitals can now provide 5G-powered remote consultation and medicine delivery by unmanned vehicles, and assistance from doctors during the course of transport in ambulances, so that sometimes the patient will arrive at the hospital and go straight to surgery for a quicker, more effective response. The examples of leased 5G lines in Saudi Arabia, Switzerland, Finland, in Greece, a digitized smart port to achieve remote control of gantry cranes, et cetera. Smart mining in Thailand and South Africa, new calling features going from voice over LTE to voice over radio. The monetization examples are very real. And as the thousands of people who toured Mobile World Congress in Barcelona and coming up in Shanghai, knowing what can work and how they can get to the point to offer these services can help them overcome one of the greatest challenges, which is how to know how much money to invest in a way that you're likely to get a return in an acceptable period of time.
Okay. I mean, maybe I play back a little of that to Robert. I mean, you know, where as you see this, and I'm kind of bringing you down from that kind of very high level, you know, around the kind of geopolitics and this kind of stuff, but for industry, which industries are driving this kind of 5G story, Robert, and what is it they want from 5G? What are the capabilities they're interested in? Is it, you know, is it latency and bandwidth as kind of advertised and as promised by the operators and the vendors, or is it actually really about coverage and perhaps reliable coverage?
Well, my sense in studying this and preparing for this conversation is that human safety, synchronization of complex experience so that things are, how do I say, the teamwork of timing is working more efficiently, and energy conservation, doing things more efficiently. All three play a very large role. Let me go back to the first one. A lot of people are afraid of technology because it displaces labor in their minds. But when you're talking about giving better health care to people without making doctors more subjected to illness themselves, like we experienced in the New York hospitals during the pandemic, that's very exciting. When you're talking about mining and not having to go down and perhaps be subjected to an avalanche or other things because you have AI integrated systems that can perform those tasks without a human being present, you're preserving life. And so I see there are a whole myriad of things, but that essence, saving energy, saving people, and integrating complexity so things that are happening in parallel can happen simultaneously, what I call a tight fit.
Yeah. Okay. John, I just wonder if I could come to you on that. Have you got thoughts on, how this is playing out in industry, where it's playing out, and what are the kind of use cases which are finding traction?
Yeah, well, I think, a lot of my background comes from the communication space, and the drivers for these changes are really not that different in terms of, industrial environments have very complicated, probably very highly proprietary, automation systems, the way they run their plants, etc. And yes, when you're out there in the resource sector, obviously oil, gas, mining, etc., these are highly mechanized, but also very, labor intensive operations. They are seeing how new technologies are enabling so many other things, and they're just waiting for it to come to them. So that's that industry, 4.0 environment. We get into that, smart manufacturing, smart cities, smart grid, all of these things. And it is all about the use case. They all see opportunities to do the things we just talked about, reduce the cost, reduce the labor, increase automation. And that's because it is industrial use of automation. It's really driven by efficiencies, because now when you can get those autonomous vehicles and drones doing all of these things, you now move from, clock-based shifts to 24-hour operation. And if you're looking for efficiencies, I mean, there's no better scenario for you if you eliminate the human risk or minimize it, and you have that continuous operation. But the flip side to that, of course, is yes, there is risk of displacing jobs, and some of these jobs we probably don't want to keep going anyways. They're not healthy or safe in the first place. But you create an environment, though, James, where when you can operate efficiencies at that scale, you become utterly dependent on the technologies. And so you're putting all your eggs in that basket. That connectivity had better be there. The data had better be secure. You had better be able to control it end to end, because now you put yourself in the same boat of really just us as consumers. When we get hacked, when we're at a contact center and giving our credit card, and a fraudster picks it up, runs with it. Well, the same thing can happen here, right? Industrial surveillance, industrial sabotage, etc. There's room for that. And then all of a sudden, when you don't have human control over it, that automation system had better be damn good and, in your control. But if it falls out of your control, then it becomes a very dangerous situation. And that's where you start looking at things like the grid, controlling the water supply, the power supply, all the things we need to survive in our urban environments. So there is a bit of a risk to this, James. So when you say what's driving the use cases, this is what they want, because the technologies are so new, but they need vendors, they need telcos to bring it to them in a way that they can see the risks, see the benefits, and be comfortable with it, because it is very transformational. This isn't just about cheaper connectivity.
And John, do you think that those industries and those enterprises have that reassurance from the telecoms and the vendor community yet? Do you see that confidence coming through?
I think there is. You talk about the Siemens of the world, who are, this is their business of having really high level automation systems for vertical markets. But the reality is, to do this stuff the way we're dreaming about it, it's very complicated. This is complex technology at that scale, because you're not just automating one thing. You're trying to automate the whole operation. And that's putting a lot of faith in this. And so I do think there is some, because it's such a big transformation, there's definitely a lot of reservation about this, because we have to keep in mind, enterprises like offices are no different than industrial operations. A lot of things are siloed, right? So if you want to bring everyone in on, you got to get everyone on the same page across the organization, and very complex logistics and processes to manage. That's not as easy as it looks. So I think it's one of these things that, you just don't flip a switch and make it happen. It's going to take time. And so I think there's some hesitancy there about how far, how fast, right? And I'm sure, Andy, you've seen a lot of that with Huawei's deployments.
Yeah, I think the limitations of resources for many carriers, I mentioned the concern about excessive investment in the wrong things. And as things roll out toward a 10 gigabyte optical network strategy, the failure to get enough adequate positive feedback early enough to convince others to invest is a challenge. And then the 10G optical network may provide values to certain sectors, but not others. And it's hard to have the uniform capability of the network if certain sectors aren't participating. So those are some of the challenges that have to be overcome. So the use cases really need to be communicated in a very effective manner.
Yeah. I mean, just on the scalability question and how this stuff, I guess translates from, one enterprise to another, and from one industry to another. I mean, John, the kind of the use cases you talked about there are clearly applicable to everybody around security and automation and this kind of stuff. But is the nitty-gritty of the kind of 5G enterprise network, is there a template for that? Does it scale yet from an enterprise in the mining or ports industry into another? Do you see what I mean?
Well, yeah, I don't know if there's like a set playbook for this, but James, I do think that, to me, the template is, I think you pick a vertical or a sector or whatever, they all have comparable challenges, not just in doing what they do in terms of their processes, but in trying to adopt new technology. And, the more mature the industry, they may have a very difficult time embracing. We certainly see this in the enterprise market, where we have companies that have 20-plus-year-old telecom deployments. They don't move that quickly to the cloud or to IP-based platforms, because they have so much invested in what's working now. And to start to kind of reinvent, undo it all, that the template is, to me, is if you focus on the challenges you're facing and understanding what these technologies do, because I think that came up earlier, but they don't really understand what these things are. And we're not even talking yet about AI, right? Just talk about, IoT doesn't have to have AI in it to be effective. And I think just where the basic 5G capabilities exist today, they have to understand what that represents. When we start talking about 5.5 or 6G, that becomes the AI story. And that takes it all to another level. We start getting into the AR, VR stuff, all these simulations, holograms. That's a whole other level of, bringing technology to the table for automation.
And I think that's one of the reasons that R&D is so critical. So the ability to enable carriers to upgrade at the least possible cost. So, for example, 50 gigabyte passive optical networks can help minimize operator investment costs. So if you can reduce the cost and maximize the value, then it helps make clearer the path forward.
Yeah, okay. So just, John, you mentioned there that the AI story and the IoT story and, everything going on top of the network. But 5G is being, I guess it's because of the moment in time where we are now. But what's the value of 5G in all of this, Robert? Is it like a killer app, for want of a better term, or is it just or a killer enabling tool? Perhaps is the expression we need here. What's the value, and does the inclusion, I guess, of a 5G network into that automation story bring confidence and bring reliability and bring security and all of those kind of things, and therefore take that story a little bit forward a little bit faster?
I enjoy your phraseology because I think 5G has a lot to do with being a life preserver and life enhancer. So it's not a killer app. It's a, how would I say, it's a human survival technique that's part of its positive potential. How about I'm being silly? What I see in the realm of 5G is the ability to reach further into complex tasks. And in the case of things like the management of ports in Tianjin and that, they are able to integrate more and more things and keep them working in parallel together like we haven't seen before. I was interested in your earlier comments, John, about the question of whether it's an adaptation that enhances the existing capital structure of the tech systems, or whether it's a displacement, in other words, making everything obsolete and you've got to go back to the well and start from scratch and rebuild. I don't know how, in terms of the economics of somebody like Huawei, you make your decisions. Do you make your decisions around what you know the capital or the technical structure is to try to enhance that, or are we trying to go so much higher that it becomes a killer app of the old infrastructure to replace it entirely?
Well, I would just comment on that, Robert, that the ROI story, I think, can be effective if we're just talking about replicating what we've already been doing, but with more automation. And to your question of a 5G being a killer app, James, I think the big story there is that it allows companies to move, just like it did in the communications area, to move away from wired, cabled communications flows, which tethers, processes, to wireless, where now, you become less location dependent. And that really opens up the playbook, right, for where and how you do things. And if you're ready to rethink, reimagine, what your logistics, what your manufacturing processes can look like, if you had more automation and less, I wouldn't call it human error, because Robert, just as human lives can be at stake, human intervention right now can still be a lifesaver when machines fail. And I think we have to get to a point where we can put the automation on equal footing with human judgment. And that's where the AI stuff comes in. And that totally, sets a new blueprint. When we talk about a template, James, for what's possible with automation. But you can't do it without these technologies. And again, coming back to where 5G goes, that the rates of transmission of data, that's the game changer in terms of, where you take things to new capabilities you couldn't have envisioned before.
Okay. Andy, John's mentioned 5.5G there. That's a term that is used. What can you talk around that? Explain what that is. It sounds a little bit like kind of marketing, but does it refer to the release 16, 17 kind of level 5G types of features that are coming down the line? Can you just talk around that a little bit?
Yeah, the bottom line is there really has been a consensus that's developed among the folks that participate in the world's the global standards that are laying the foundation for 5.5G or 5G advanced. Release 18 will be the first 5.5G release. It will be frozen in 2024. What we're talking about is 10 gigabyte per second downlink peak rates, 1 gigabyte uplink rates, millisecond level latency, low cost 100 billion IoT connections, and capabilities beyond connections such as sensing and high precision positioning. So there's a recognition that upgrading to ubiquitous 10 gigabyte all optical networks can bring huge opportunities to carriers. And in short, it can bring real-time resilient connections, network capabilities that come closer to industrial class, and it can meet microsecond level latency of 99.9% availability requirements. So all these things are recognized by major company, government, and academic figures around the world. Not by everybody yet, but it certainly looks like it's a path forward.
Yeah. Okay. And John, Robert, your thoughts on 5.5G or 5.5G and what, you know, the types of use cases this will enable and what the future holds? I mean, perhaps, John, we start with you. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the main idea here again is it's not just faster, it's orders of magnitude faster. And when we start getting into a world that's being more and more shaped by AI capability, you know, AI is 100% data driven. And the more data that feeds the machine, the more value it has. So when you start looking at the ROI of the investment, because, you know, the reality is carriers have had to take on a lot of debt just to get to this level of AI, of 5G. Now we're asking to go to, you know, a couple of more steps up the ladder. There's going to be more hesitancy to say, well, this isn't proven yet. But when you start to look at industries or sectors where AI is starting to make a difference, and good examples, of course, would be, we mentioned COVID before, you know, the medical community, we couldn't have come up with these vaccines without AI capabilities. Just the brute horsepower it brings to, you know, synthesize volumes of data that are way beyond computer and certainly human comprehension. This is, again, it becomes driven by machines as opposed to humans. It's a new way of doing things. And of course, once the genie's out of the bottle, it's hard to put it back in. So we have to be wary of this too. But it's just that level, as you say, with the 5.5 and eventually 6, this takes us into these worlds. You know, for example, Microsoft, you know, they've invested heavily in mesh for good reason, because they're already at the point where they're envisioning a post-PC world where we won't have PCs anymore. Everything is going to be interfaces, screens, tabletops. You won't need a keyboard. You won't need a computer. Just, it will be ubiquitous, these levels of connectivity. And that's the world we're moving to. And industrial applications will be no different. And again, this is just a big change that we're far from. It's a far world from what we're doing today. But the people who understand this stuff, they're going to come up with the visions for how this is going to work.
Yeah, lovely. And Robert, just to go to you, I mean, is the genie out of the bottle? And what you know, what happens? How do you see this going from a kind of in a geopolitical sense?
Well, I sense this is
hazard a guess.
This is a little bit like watching brilliant jazz musicians on stage. They improvise and interact with each other, and it's not a script.
Great analogy there. Yeah.
Where I see it right now in my own studies is with regard to trading in stock markets. What we've often seen is very, very gifted analysts who create what I'll call lateral pattern recognition. Some intuitive and some doing systematic things like and studying, say, on a Bloomberg machine or other online sources, Reuters, etc. Well, now with AI feedback getting faster and faster, people are able to make intra-hour and intraday trading system decisions. A lot of currency traders are now using AI. And what they tell me is you can't put on a position that lasts any longer than 2 weeks because so much else happens. But the quality of your rate of return on day trading is really, really going up because of the faster networks and the ability to get more feedback in a very short period of time.
But doesn't this raise the issue? I think, Andy, you'll speak to this. Sorry.
John, I'm gonna stop you if I can. We got a hard stop. We got to move on. I'm sorry to bring this to a close. I would have liked to pull Andy in for a final comment, but actually I've just been informed we've got to move on. But look, thank you for your time, everybody. It's been fascinating. We covered a lot of ground. We got into some quite philosophical stuff as well, I would suggest. But thank you to the panel. Thank you to Andy Purdy from Huawei Technologies, Robert Johnson from the Institute for New Economic Thinking, and John Arnold for J. Arnold and Associates. There is another session starting just now with Analysys Mason, Arcus, and Verizon on how to implement a private 5G network within a legacy system. So that should be good. But that's all from us. Thank you for now. Goodbye.
Okay, bye now.